Welcome fellow chosen undead. Before we start, if you are passionate about the lore in these games, then please consider checking out my channel. Please remember to like, and if you are new, subscribe. With all that out of the way, let us begin. The types of Titanite that can be found within Lordran are as follows: Titanite Shard, Green Titanite Shard, Large Titanite, Titanite Chunk, Red Chunk, Blue Chunk, White Chunk, Titanite Slab, Red Slab, Blue Slab, White Slab, Twinkling Titanite, and Demon Titanite. The Titanite Chunk reads: Titanite Chunk for weapon reinforcement, not found outside of Lordran. With the discovery of chunks in Lordran, the race to locate the legendary slabs has begun, but could they be mere myth? The first question to answer is, what exactly is Titanite? In the time before fire, known as the Age of Ancients, the world was unformed and shrouded by fog. All that existed were grey crags, arched trees, and everlasting dragons. With the emergence of fire, life began and parallels were spawned. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark. To quote the Titanite Chunk again, not found outside of Lordran. This is because what would later become Lordran was where life first emerged. From the dark they came and found the souls of lords within the flame. The Witch of Izalith, Nito, Gwyn, and the traitor known as Seath all contributed to the defeat of the ancient dragons. These beings, made from mineral, were sentient, but not what you would call living. Gwyn and his knights peeled back their scales with lightning, light being time, something that had never previously existed before the emergence of fire. Fire sorceries were used by the witch and her daughters to destroy the very trees that the ancient dragons nested in. Nito, the first of the dead, swarmed the dragons with his miasma of death, and Seath the Scaleless betrayed his own, driven by jealousy for the very thing he could never possess. The war with the dragons was not over as soon as the fire emerged. For example, the training and recruitment of knights and the smithing of their weaponry and armour all take time. For fire sorceries to be understood and then taught also takes time. Seath is also evidence that some time passed before the war ended. The emergence of life corrupted the ancient dragons, causing their offsprings to be warped and transformed into a new being. Everlasting dragons and their descendants were hunted. Although changed, the enemy remained the same in the eyes of the new lords. On the subject of change, Seath and his imperfections is a topic I am eager to discuss, but that is a different story for a different day. There are three ways to use runes. The first two major uses of runes are for writing, however their approach differs drastically. Runes are intended to work much like an alphabet. This alphabet is solely based on phonetics. This means that, compared to English, runes act more like units of sound than letters. The second major use for runes is to represent concepts, ideas, or objects, this meaning that they are a complete thought. The third is for divination and fortune telling. Similar in use to tarot cards, one or more runes are randomly selected to produce an answer to a question, predict the future, or to provide general guidance. The fragments of runes seen etched onto the small and large shards cannot easily be deciphered. Both could be sections of many different runes, however, the rune that I believe them to be fragments of is found on the Titanite Chunk. This rune, although not exact, appears to be known as Savilo, meaning sun. This rune can also be found elsewhere, more on that later. Similar to the small and large shards of the regular Titanite, the Green Titanite Shard is a fragment of a much larger rune. However, this fragment could only ever represent one thing, and that is the rune known as Algiaz. This rune is most commonly associated with Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil, also known as the Tree of Life. The rune depicted on the white Titanite chunk is called Anzus. This means God and has a close association with divinity. As we know, the white titanite chunk can be used to upgrade weapons of either the occult or divine. There are many connections to the occult when discussing titanite, however I wish to save that story for a separate video. The rune depicted on the red titanite chunk is called Kornen, this meaning torch. Rather fitting, don't you think? The rune depicted on the blue titanite chunk is called Lagus, this means water, however it can also be associated with mind and the subconscious. Excluding the unique sorceries from the lost land of Utherseal, the colour of sorceries is most commonly blue. Someone once asked, what do you think it feels like to be damaged by sorcery? My answer was one that no one else provided. To me, the sensation would be similar to the pain and shock that can be felt when jumping into icy waters. The sudden chill snatches your breath away and you feel as if your very soul is being sucked from within you. The rune depicted on the twinkling titanite is called Laoliz. This rune means hardship or need. The meaning of this rune and how this titanite came to be is a subject that I will continue when discussing Seath the Scaleless in a future video. And last but not least are the titanite slabs. Each slab is different, yet their runes remain the same. These slabs contain 3 lines of runes. Line 1 reads as follows: The meek sought God in the trees. Yggdrasil, the tree of life, bestowed gifts of plenty, joy and health. Line 2 reads as follows: They remained and hardship set in. They found a spark, which turned into a sun, driving away the cold. Terrible trouble came, the sun ended this conflict. Line 3 reads as follows: This age continued and began an era of wealth and plenty. Man will ascend, cold will return. The slabs tell a story of the past, present and future. It is a celebration but also a warning. This message must remain never to be forgotten, and because of this I believe that the titanite is the flesh of the ancient dragons. The story of creation was etched into the remains of the conquered rulers of the old world. But who was the person responsible for creating these stone tablets? Titanite slab reads: Titanite slab for weapon reinforcement. Legendary slabs were the domain of the gods. Legendary slabs are the heirlooms of a nameless blacksmith deity who forged the weapons of other gods. Weapons forged with this slab became rare legendary weapons. The mention of the blacksmith deity being nameless is curious. You would think that a being responsible for creating these stone tablets would be named and celebrated. These runes of meaning and power etched onto the flesh of the ancients were then used in creating weapons for gods. However, as we know, gods are capable of losing their name. The Ring of the Sun's Firstborn reads: Ring of the Sun's Firstborn, who inherited the light of Gwyn, the First Lord, greatly boosts miracles. The sun's firstborn was once a god of war until he was stripped of his stature as punishment for his foolishness. No wonder his very name has slipped from the annals of history. What did the blacksmith deity do to become nameless? Was it their own foolishness, or is it simply due to the passing of time and the fall of the Age of Fire? Many gods left Anor Londo with the decline of the Age of Fire, however some remained. The gods that remained can either be found in shadows, or are simply shadows of their former selves. What then became the blacksmith deity? Demon Titanite reads: Special Titanite stolen from a faceless stone beast known as a Titanite demon. When the nameless blacksmith deity passed, from several slabs did beasts arose. The power of Titanite remains within them, and they still roam Lordran today. The mention of the passing of the blacksmith deity is something that we will continue with later, but for now let us focus on the demons themselves. Hephaestus is the Greek god of blacksmithing, metalworking, carpenters, craftsmen, artisans, sculptures, metallurgy and fire. He is also thought to be a son of Zeus, and that he was born lame or was made lame after he was expelled from Olympus. The definition of lame reads: unable to walk without difficulty as the result of an injury or illness affecting the leg or foot. The Titanite demons also do not possess a head. Could this detail relate to the death of the blacksmith deity? The missing head, the server, Izalith and much more are all topics relating to the plot against the gods. As I previously mentioned, this plot and the occult I wish to save for a separate video. The demons use a weapon called a catchpole. The Titanite demon catchpole reads, "Weapon of the Titanite demon, a faceless stone monster born from Titanite slab, one of the enchanted weapons, perhaps from residual power of the Titanite slab, known for its leaping attack which comes smashing down on foes from above." Catchpoles are typically used to safely detain animals from a distance. However, the catchpole that the demon uses does not create a full loop. Perhaps instead, this weapon is meant to represent a pair of blacksmith tongs. Catchpole was also a common surname given to tax collectors in medieval England. Could it be possible then that the demon represents a debt that was not paid? A debt that resulted in death and triggered their existence. The weapon is also used by the demons to conjure lightning. Lightning is associated with the Lord of Light, Gwyn. The blacksmith deity forged weapons for the gods. These weapons were used to fight the ancient dragons. Could a friendship with Gwyn have been formed due to the much needed help in the war with the dragons? Like what can be found when discussing Gwyn and Hawkeye Go. The firstborn inherited the light of Gwyn. He was also known as the god of war. Only 2 wars that we know of have ever occurred, the war with the dragons and the war with the demons. Wars are of course fought with weapons. Could the firstborn also be connected to the blacksmith deity and somehow be involved with his death? After all, both deities are nameless. The Titanite demons can be found in the following locations: the Forgotten Old Church, the Catacombs, Sen's Fortress, Anor Londo, and the Lost City of Izalith. First, let's start with the Forgotten Old Church. There is no way of telling of how long Andre has been set up inside of the Forgotten Old Church. He sells and can use Titanite, meaning that he is aware of its existence and its power. Perhaps it was this that made him leave his homeland of Astora. From slabs we know the demons spawned. If this slab had been in Andre's possession, then you may expect him to mention the monster in the basement, but he does not. The demon could have made its way into the lower chamber by simply destroying the wall. However, I believe that this wasn't the case. Destroyed pillars can be seen throughout the room, their destruction presumably brought about by the countless conflicts between the demon and other adventurers. The removal of these pillars then caused the structure to collapse in certain areas. Located above the parish's bonfire is a room that's exit leads one straight to the new church. Inside of this room is an altar, and above this altar is an alcove, this being a perfect place for what I believe was a Titanite slab. As I mentioned earlier, these slabs tell a story certainly worth worshipping, and what better place to find this item of worship than a church? This observation and theory also tie in with the location of a Titanite demon found within Anor Londo. There are many rooms that can be found within Gwyn's Keep. However, for this video we are only interested in one. A small chapel contains a Titanite demon, and that certainly raises suspicion. Inside of this room is an altar, which I believe once held yet another worshipped Titanite slab. Many dead are laid to rest inside of the catacombs, and clearly some were more important than others. Many highly decorated tombs are found spaciously placed within this former domain of the Lord of Death. Here within this pitch black is yet another Titanite demon. I believe that one of the tombs once contained a slab, and that it was buried alongside an individual of significant importance. After all, this would not be the only grave that contains the corpse of someone with strong connections to the gods. If one gives stir to humanity to the fair lady, a shortcut into Izalith is revealed. On this elevated route, a powerful Titanite demon can be found. This is the only one that respawns. I believe its ability to respawn is a gameplay consideration, but its presence within Izalith is an especially important topic when discussing the blacksmith deity, a topic I will continue in a separate video. In my previous video discussing the Night King Rendell, the Night Berenique and the Black Iron Tarkus, I covered the creation, the use and the history of this House of 1,000 Traps. For those who have not yet watched the mentioned video, then I shall reiterate some points. When standing in the royal garden of Ulasil, the undead Burg, Parish and Sens fortress cannot be seen. They have yet to be built. The DLC took place 300 years before the timeline of the main game, so within the last 300 years, Sens fortress was created, with its overseer being Gwyn's firstborn. It was originally built with the intent of training the then would-be Silver Knights. This is why we find Titanite demons at the base of this fortress. With this fortress being the location where training to become a legendary Silver Knight took place, armour and weaponry needed to be maintained. It then makes sense for large quantities of this equipment to be located here, and of course the materials needed to repair them. Returning to the Titanite chunk, I had previously mentioned that the rune etched onto its face can be seen elsewhere. If you recall, the meaning of this rune was sun. The topic of giants I have also covered in a previous video called Giants Slaves of Lordran. However, I intentionally left out some of my other observations when discussing their attire and role within Sens. Their helmets intentionally hide their identity while also marking them as a slave. When they are killed, the item that they drop is a Titanite chunk. If we compare the Zvilo rune to their helmets, we see a striking resemblance. As mentioned, this rune marks them as a slave whilst also representing the sun. The individual previously responsible in overseeing this fortress was the firstborn, who inherited the light from his father. If you recall, Hephaestus was believed to be the son of Zeus, both the Titanite demon and Gwyn's appearance clearly being inspired by Hephaestus and his father Zeus. Could it then be that the relationship between these Greek gods is also factored into their design? I believe these mentioned points all fit within the occult plot against the gods, and as I've stated, I intend to create a separate video covering that vast topic. Returning to the slave race of giants, I'd like to suggest a theory. Could it be possible that these beings are made from stone or titanite? If we recall, the ancient dragons were entities made completely from stone, later known as titanite. The story of creation was etched upon their flesh. This flesh can also be used to create weapons of legend. Titanite demons spawned from these slabs with the passing of the blacksmith deity. Enemies known as stone demons can also be found within the demon ruins and the city of Lost Izalith. They are yet another example of life being breathed into stone. Only the blacksmith deity could possess the power and knowledge to create these mentioned beings. With the defeat of the ancient dragons, he not only took their flesh, but also the knowledge of how stone can be used as a vessel. As we know, stones being vessels for souls is a topic that is continued in later installments of the Dark Souls franchise. Continuing with the topic of giants, gods are a race of giants. Nito has a giant skeletal structure beneath his lesser bones of the dead. The Witch of Izalith towers over her daughters, and Gwyn too towers over his knights. I then believe that the Titanite demon is a visual representation of the appearance that the blacksmith deity once took, with the missing head representing his execution. If the giants are indeed a creation of the blacksmith deity, then the mark of the slave placed upon their heads could be a purposeful reminder of their creator's mistakes. As we've discussed, the DLC took place 300 years before the timeline of the main game. In his confinement, Hawkeye Go can be seen whittling wooden carvings in the same fashion as the blacksmith that resides in the City of the Gods.
Now, do not mistake my words. I cherish my work. Wood carving is a nuanced art. I would have much to talk about with that blacksmith. In truth, how is the old chap, I wonder? Still hammering away, I should hope.
This blacksmith is a giant and bears the mark of the slave. However, we cannot know for certain if the giant blacksmith possessed this mark during the events of the DLC. We also cannot be certain that he is the individual that Go is referring to. The giant blacksmith is capable of crafting legendary weapons. Legendary weapons were once the domain of the nameless blacksmith deity. I then believe that the giant blacksmith was the apprentice of the nameless blacksmith deity. The apprentice learned from his master, not only acquiring his skill, but also his technique. The I'm sorry carving reads, "Head carved of arched trees by Go in his imprisonment." Go imparts an emotion to each and every completed carving, which helps him achieve personal enlightenment. When a head is disturbed, it speaks, reflecting the emotion conferred to it. This head says, "I'm sorry, have another look." Isn't that an expression of atonement? Head carved by arched trees. The caduceus round shield reads, round wooden shield crafted in Lordran, decorated by an ancient blue caduceus. The giant trees in Lordran are distant offsprings of the great stone arch trees. This shield inherits their properties, and the wood greatly reduces magic damage. As we've discussed, stone can be a vessel for life. The carvings that Go creates are formed from arched trees. Arched trees are made of stone. Go gives his carvings life through emotion. As I have previously mentioned, the technique he uses is the exact same that can be seen when observing the slave giant blacksmith. This can only mean that both were taught by the same master. Prior to the blacksmith deity's passing, the Titanite demons did not yet exist. Only upon his death did they spring from the slabs, so the question remains, when was his death and who may have been responsible? As we've discussed, the Titanite demons can be found in specific locations. The Undead Burg, Parish and Sen's Fortress did not yet exist at the time of the DLC. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, had left to link the flame before these events, with his firstborn son inheriting his light and kingdom. The firstborn was worshipped, his statue erected within the parish. Sen's Fortress was constructed with him as its overseer. His sister Guinevere and younger brother Gwyndolin remained in the capital. Returning to the past, statues of Gwyndolin can be found within Ulasil. The image depicted upon the "I'm sorry" carving is a crescent moon. The expression is said to be of atonement. The definition of atonement reads, the action of making amends for a wrong or injury, or in religious contexts, reparation or expiation for sin. Gwyndolin is the master of the Blades of the Darkmoon Covenant, a covenant that metes out punishment to those who have sinned against the gods. I propose in my Giant Slaves of Lordran video that Gwyndolin is responsible for imprisoning Go. Perhaps he too is responsible for warranting the death of the blacksmith deity. Could he be the reason that the giants now bear the mark of the slave? These giants now serve the prophecy and aid him in finding a worthy vessel to fill with souls. Souls to then be used to rekindle the first flame. The slabs foretold of man's ascension and return of the cold dark. Faith in the flame brought about man's destruction. The keepers of the fire marked man with undeath. Perhaps this decision angered the blacksmith deity. Fate already etched in stone was now being rewritten. A plot was hatched, but the plan failed, and those who had sinned were punished for their involvement. Thank you for watching, guys. This video wouldn't have been possible without the brilliant research from a Fextralife wiki user named Scarecrow13. Please be sure to check out their findings in the links below. As I've mentioned many times throughout this video, the blacksmith deity is a being that has connections to many other stories found throughout Dark Souls. I wish to do them justice by dedicating those subjects to their separate videos. If you made it this far, please remember to like, and if you're new, subscribe. So that about does it, guys. Again, I say thank you for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.